David, today's poll that the Simon Institute released shows that Republican Bill Brady is leading Governor Quinn by 9 points. This is a little bit different than what some of the more recent polls have shown. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, other polls have shown Quinn sort of catching up with Brady. And I think that's been because Democratic voters are coming home. They had a spirited primary. Governor Quinn had some problems with women, African Americans, and so voters, as election nears, tend to go back to their respective parties. They come home. This is showing, though, that clearly the enthusiasm in this race, the energy, the interest, the anger is on the Republican side. And so what I think we may be looking at, and of course we won't know until after the election is over, is that this is a period in which the Democrats have had a bit of a surge, and now Senator Brady has started to have a bit of surge of his own in this race for governor.
There's also still quite a startling amount of undecided voters out there. Is there any indication about where those undecided voters are and who they might ultimately side with?
You know, undecided voters are one of the toughest things for pollsters to divine. I think a lot of undecided voters really are having trouble deciding between Brady and Quinn. Secondly, we still have a couple weeks left before the election, and voters increasingly decide later and later who they're going to vote for. It drives all of us political junkies crazy, but voters understand they don't have to decide until they go into the voting booth or until they start to mark their absentee ballot. So they take their time. They want to see what happens. And finally, you have, I think, a lot of undecided voters who just simply don't vote. It's not cool to say, I'm not going to vote, so they'll just say, I'm undecided, and come election day, they stay home.
Can you talk about Scott Lee Cohen, Rich Whitney, and Lex Green, the third-party candidates, and what effect they're having on that particular race?
It looks like it's a wash. There's been a lot of speculation about, well, will the Greens take away from the Democrats? Is Cohen taking away from the Democrats? Will the Libertarian take away from a Republican? We asked what voters would do if their candidate wasn't in the race. And they divide about equally. And so you have some voters who like those third-party candidates, but if but the big party candidates weren't there, these voters would simply split their votes or not vote at all.
Now, in the race for Senate,
and I might add, Martin, as with third-party voters, they tend to go home too as election nears. People don't like to waste their votes, and so I think you have a tendency for third parties to really fade. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay, and I'm glad you continue, because, perhaps what was surprising to me a little bit was how low the third-party candidate numbers have been. I still remember 2006, where Rich Whitney polled nearly 11-12% in that gubernatorial election. And it seems like with all the bad press out about Senator Brady and Governor Quinn, that those candidates would be doing better. What's happening?
Well, I think the Greens have got to make a more persuasive argument. Part of the reason that Rich Whitney did so well 4 years ago was that there was so much disgust with Blagojevich among Democrats, and it was something of a protest vote. This is a different election. It's a serious, close election, and Democrats are having a hard time getting behind Quinn. They gradually moved that way. Governor Quinn has still got some work to do with his base. And so some of these Green voters 4 years ago are probably going to be Democrats this time.
Now, in the Senate race, the margin is even smaller. It's within our margin of error, actually. Let's see, the numbers on that was for the Republican Mark Kirk, 37.3%. For the Democrat, Alexei Giannoulias, 36.8%. And other third-party candidates pulling in less than 5%. But again, there's that 18.3% of undecided voters. How in the Senate race do you see people to decide on, or when those undecided voters would make up their minds?
Well, it's hard. First of all, it is a statistical tie, as you say. Now, in a race that has an incumbent, like the race for governor, undecided voters will tend to break for the challenger. For some reason, the undecided voter has a problem with the incumbent. That's why they're undecided. In a race like the Senate race between Giannoulias and Kirk, you've got two challengers. You've got two people who are not incumbents. And so again, I think both of these contestants in this race have had all kinds of problems. Janulius over Broadway Bank, Kirk over his embellishing his record, and it's left a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth about both of them. And some voters are saying, yeah, I don't like either one. I'm going to take my time to see. This race is going to go to the wire.
Do you see those, you mentioned Broadway Bank and Kirk's embellishments, do you still see those still playing effect even though those were before Labor Day?
I do, because they keep coming up. Last week the two candidates met on Meet the Press, and it came up there again. So this is like Muzak, Barton. It's just getting played over and over and over again, and it leaves a taste in voters' mouths that is not going to go away before Election Day.
Now, is there a geographic region of the state that you're looking at to kind of decide, maybe break down this tie a little bit more to kind of show who might have a little bit of an edge?
Well, in the race for governor and in the race for senator, I think the battle's in the suburbs. Okay, you've got downstate and the northern parts of the state, rural areas. Those are pretty Republican. Chicago is pretty Democratic. The battle is in the suburbs, and neither of the Democrats have really been able to break through that Republican stronghold in the suburbs. And if the Republicans get their vote out and they've got a lot of energy, they could pick up both of these races.
Meanwhile, in the Congress, we asked people if the election were held today, would they vote for the Republican or the Democrat candidate in their congressional district. 40.8% of respondents said that they would vote for the Republican, while 40% said that they would vote for the Democrat. Now that's incredibly close. But the other thing that kind of stood out at me was the question about how do people feel about the state and the national government and where they're headed. And overwhelmingly, people said that they did not like where we were going, either in Washington, D.C. or in Springfield. Doesn't that kind of indicate an anti-incumbency trend that we should be seeing this November?
There's no question about that. What's striking about that number, Barton, is that people in Illinois see their state in far worse shape than the federal government. That usually doesn't happen. In many states, you'll find people are unhappy. They think things are really bad in Washington, but they're not so bad closer to home. It's the opposite in Illinois. It's about 80% of people in Illinois think the state's going in the wrong direction. That's huge.
Now, just to kind of wrap up, what kind of makes our poll different from some of the others that have been released?
Well, everybody likes to brag about their poll. I mean, I think that we have a good sample size of 1,000 registered voters, over 750 likely voters. That enables us to get around a 3% margins of error. So I think our sample size is a good one. We spent some time and effort and resources to make sure that we were getting a good picture of this race. We don't do this just for politics. We do it partly for academic research, and you need to have enough to work with there. But in races that are this close, you've got to have a decent sample size and a survey that's conducted properly for it to really tell you anything.
David, should be an interesting week with a couple different poll results being released. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.